So I was recently thinking about one of the more earlier videos that I've released on my channel, and that was the first video that really took off for the channel, and that was the video where I talked about whether or not Core was a fail in Ninjago subline. And by extent, I started talking about Legacy as well, and in the video I actually say that I do wish that Legacy did receive another year, but also not at the consequence of Core, and I genuinely do stand by that statement. But that's the thing, since that video I have been thinking about what another line of Legacy could have actually have looked like, and before I go any further I want to clarify that I am not a LEGO designer, I am not anywhere near qualified for what I've done in this video, it is simply a concept that I thought of over the span of a couple of weeks. But I did want to show what an idea on what another wave of Legacy could have looked like theoretically if we did get it. And before I do start, I do have a couple of things that I did go by when it came to doing this. So I designed a line of what Legacy could have been. I got 7 set concepts that I do have, and they all fell under a certain criteria. I had small sets, and these are sets that could have been anywhere between 150 to 500 pieces, and I have 2 of those. I have 2 medium-sized sets, which is somewhere between 500 to 900 pieces. I have 2 large sets, which is between 1000 to 1500 pieces, and I have 1 set that I dubbed the Mega Set, which is over 2000 pieces large, and that is essentially what we get with the modular city builds, but this is not one that interconnects into that. But I did want to base a line off of the size of the set itself, and I will tell you generally speaking how many pieces the set idea I had does have, but overall it's one of those things where it's down to interpretation. And let me know which ones of these you do agree with, which ones you don't, and what you would personally like to see in another line of Legacy. But without further ado, let's talk about what another line of Legacy could have looked like. So, like I said, starting off with the smaller set, and I want to preface this by saying that I did build off of what Legacy already did, and I did want to somewhat kind of coincide with what already existed. And I have taken a couple of liberties, and like I said, please don't just kick off in the comments. Like I said, I'm not qualified. But the first of the smaller sets that I thought of was one that I just called the First Spinjitzu Master's Resting Place. And this is of course just a set that would have simulated where we found the Realm Crystal in Season 5, and the set in question would have just showed the resting place of the First Spinjitzu Master. It would have been a nice simple small set, would have just been nice to have had in a collection essentially, and I had 3 minifigures in mind for this set. For one, we would have gotten a Moro, we would have gotten a Legacy variant, not exactly the Dragon's Rising one that we got, but also not an exact replica of what we got in Season 5, but it would have had a Moro. It would have had a Season 5 Lloyd, based off of what we got from the Legacy Zane that we got in Wave 2 of Legacy, and we also would have gotten a Legacy Kai. And well, those would have been the 3 minifigures, theoretically a 4th because the set would have had a skeleton to represent the First Spinjitzu Master, but the point is, it would have just been a nice little set to represent that moment in Season 5, because it's a fairly important one. The reason I picked Lloyd and Kai specifically, well, it goes without saying, of course Lloyd would have been recently no longer possessed by Moro, and obviously Kai was the one who held the Realm Crystal, so it feels like it would have made sense to have had these 3 in this set specifically, but like I said, let me know what you guys would have changed about that. The only other thing about the set, how many pieces? It probably would have been on the lower side. It doesn't really need to be too much, probably 250 to 350 pieces overall, but again, nice and simple and to the point. But that was the first idea. The second smaller set that I thought of was one I just dubbed the Monastery Forge, and it would have been one to represent the scene in Season 10 where Kai reforged the golden weapons. And this set would have coincided and would have been able to interconnect essentially into the Monastery of Spinjitzu from Legacy, but also would have stood on its own 2 feet. But it would have been a nice add-on to really represent one of the more iconic scenes from March of the Oni. This also would have had 3 minifigures. It would have had a Blacksmith Kai. It probably would have just been the exact same one that we did get in Legacy beforehand, but it would have had, of course, a Legacy Kai. It would have had a Wu, because of course he was the one observing the weapons and approving of the weapons in that scene, and also it would have had a Nia, and I bounced between whether or not I would have just wanted a Legacy Nia, or if they would have went for a new mold essentially, and they would have went for the blue outfit she wore at the start of Season 10, but because it's a smaller set they probably wouldn't have, but it's still nice to think about in concept, but there it is. But this set essentially would have just had the forge itself. It would have had the 4 golden weapons, maybe even a small buildable variant of the golden armor, but it's one of those ones that would have just had a couple nice minifigures and would have had the golden weapons as well. And like I said, it would have then connected into the monastery, and honestly, this probably would have been on the higher end in terms of the piece counts, probably towards that 500 maybe, just so it's all nice and detailed, but still it would have had to have been to scale with the monastery. But I do think it's a nice set idea and would have been definitely one that I would have liked personally. But again, let me know what you think. But those were the ideas for the smaller sets, and like I said, let me know what you think, because a smaller set is very difficult. There are a lot of Ninjago sets that exist that shouldn't have been a smaller set, and I didn't want to fall into that criteria. But honestly, I think these two would have made for very nice additions, or just very nice pieces, and also fit that smaller aesthetic. But again, let me know what you think of the smaller sets, but let's move on to the medium size. The medium-sized sets I felt like I could be a little more playful with, because larger sets of course need to be big proper parts of Ninjago, but medium sets you can get away with near enough anything, and I decided to go with the theme of ninja vehicles. The first one I thought of, and possibly the one that I might get a little more controversy on, is actually one that I just called Nia's Elemental Dragon, and that is because, apart from Nia, all the ninja to this point have had a set to represent their Elemental Dragon on their own, because of course Nia has her water form dragon from season 15, but it doesn't really count, and she also has the merge dragon or the fusion dragon from season 7, but it would be nice to have had a set would have just been her elemental dragon, similar in vein to Kai's from Legacy, but again, just one of her own. And funnily enough, I actually originally had this idea as a Cole elemental dragon, but ultimately, for one, Cole technically has an elemental dragon, but it's just a very small set, and also Cole does pop back up, as a bit of a spoiler alert for the next one, but ultimately, I feel like it would have been nice to have had a Nia one, but the minifigures I think people would have been a little too unhappy about, and it would have come with 4, one of them being a sleeveless variant of Nia to match with the Wave 2 Legacy Ninja, and the same for a Zane as well, just to complete the sleeveless look for the ninja. And I know that's a bit of out of place because they're meant to represent season 4, but the season 4 sleeveless outfits also represented season 3, so I'm kind of turning a blind eye. And as for the villains, I would have just had 2 of the Legacy Ghosts. And again, I feel like people would have really have judged the minifigure selection, but I didn't really want to introduce, say, the Sky Pirates, because it would have just been introducing a whole new wave of minifigures and I just couldn't get away with it. So I thought just add 2 ghosts to continue to add to a Legacy Ghost army, because of course Possession does come up again in this list, so it would have been one of those ones where it would have just been nice to have had. But 4 minifigures on a near elemental dragon, similar in vein to Kai's, probably 600 or 700 pieces, just enough to get the right amount of detail, but a near elemental dragon is definitely one I would have loved to have had, but that was the first idea for a medium set. The second medium set, like I said, is Cole, and it would have been a legacy variant of his golden weapon vehicle from season 1, because of course in Legacy we got both of Kai and Zane's bikes and we got Jay's jet, but we never actually got Cole's Assault Tread. I think that was the name of the first set that he got in, but ultimately he got the Earth Driller instead, but it would have been nice to have actually had it to complete the golden weapon vehicle collection, so I feel like this would have been the perfect opportunity. This probably would have been towards the bottom end of the piece count, but you could have gotten away with a bit of a larger one, but again, probably only needs about 600 pieces to be honest with you, but it would have just been a nice time to have gotten the final of the golden weapon vehicles, and again, it would have come with 4 minifigures. And this is actually where I'm going to introduce the new ninja outfit for this wave of Legacy, because of course it would have been nice to have had a new one, and ultimately I know a lot of people would have liked this, and it's going to be a Legacy variant of the ZX Ninja, and let's just say this one comes with, of course, a Legacy ZX Cole, and I also put in a Legacy ZX J to go along with it, but of course the rest of the ninja do come back up elsewhere. But apart from those 2, it would have had a Legacy variant of Scalador and a Legacy variant of the Choken, and I have a fairly valid reason for this. The reason I did go for the Constricti is because they were assigned to Cole in all the advertisements for season 1, and also Cole did have a fair few encounters with them, and the thing is that we got a Legacy variant of Pythor, so it would have just been nice to have gotten more of the Serpentine generals. So this is where you would have seen Escalador because of that reason, just another one of the generals, and having a Chokin because he is fairly iconic in the Ninjago community, and ultimately I think it just would have been a nice pairing for a very nice looking set. But again, that's the idea I had for this set, and I do think it's a nice one because it would have completed all the golden weapon vehicles. But again, let me know what you think. Did you want to see a version of Cole's vehicle or not? Because personally, I really did, and I'm surprised they never actually cashed in on it. But those were the two medium-sized sets that I thought of. And again, like I said, the theme of those were just ninja vehicles or a ninja dragon because, I mean, you can't really have a wave of Ninjago without it. But actually, this was, funnily enough, the only instance of ninja vehicles, because when we go up to the larger sets, they're actually villain-based. And this is because I have a personal thing where I feel like we don't get enough of villain vehicles. I feel like we get a lot of love for the ninja, but not the villains. So I wanted this legacy variant to actually cover more of the villain side of things, because it's just a nice thing to really get. But let's actually get into it. The first of the larger sets that I thought of was based on the idea that a lot of the ninja now are getting their Titan mechs. Of course, we've had one for Jay, we've had one for Lloyd, we've had one for Cole, we've had one for all of the ninja in some way, shape or form. So it's time to introduce a villain one, and no better than to introduce Garmadon's mech from Season 2. Because I feel like this is one that a lot of people would have loved, and it's an amazing design in general. And so it would have just been nice to have gotten one, and I think it would have paired up nicely with a lot of the different things that we did get from Legacy. So ultimately, it just would have been a very nice aspect to have. I feel like this would have fell a bit into the lower end of the piece count, probably just 1100 pieces overall, because you can get away with a really nice mech for that size. I mean, the Zane one that just released for Dragon's Rising Season 3, I think is 1080 pieces, and that thing's fantastic. So it's one of those ones where they definitely could have got away with a lower piece count, but they definitely would have needed enough. But as for the minifigures, we would have seen a version of Legacy Garmadon, probably just with the helmet that controls the Stone Army. We would have seen a Stone Warrior and a Stone Scout, just to obviously give some foot soldiers, continue the Stone Army building. And then as for the good side, we would have seen a Golden Lloyd, and we would have seen a Wu. And of course, this may be where you go, oh, well, you're just reusing minifigures, but ultimately, they're the ones that just kind of match up. And of course, this set is definitely more for the build than the minifigures, and this is coming from a minifigure guy. But yeah, that would have been the concept for the minifigures for the set. The only other thing I'd note I thought of when it came to the set is that it would have been nice to have gotten a buildable brick-built version of the Overlord's Orb before, of course, we see him possess Garmadon. And it would have just been nice to finally get a representation of that stage of the Overlord, because I feel like we have every other variant apart from this one. So it would have been nice to have had a full orb to maybe just mount onto the mech, but it would have been a nice accent to definitely really sell away this set. But that was the concept for the first of the larger ones. The second largest set, I feel like I'm calling on a lot of OG fans when I say this, but I feel like it's finally time to get the Snake Train. Now, of course, it was initially cancelled way back in the day, so it would have been great to have finally seen it come back in Legacy. Now, this one definitely would have been on the higher end of the piece count, probably more towards 1500, so you could have had a couple of train carts going behind it. But again, it would have just been nice to have finally gotten it, especially considering it was the talking piece of one of the final episodes of Season 1. So I think it's about time we do get a set like that. Of course, if Legacy did continue on, but you know what I mean. But yeah, getting a Snake Train would have been fantastic. As for the minifigures, again, we're going to get another one of the Serpentine Generals. A Legacy version of Scales would have been absolutely fantastic. And then pair him up with some more of the Legacy Hypnobrai, and I feel like we would have had the villains nice and sorted out. But again, then we would have 3 of the 5 generals. And of course, if Legacy was to continue, you would then get the final 2 in, say, another set. Because a Legacy version of Acidicus in particular would have been fantastic. But of course, we can always dream. But as for the Ninja, that's where we get the Legacy ZX variants of Kai, Zane, and Lloyd. And of course, you're just thinking, I've just paired the other 3 into the set, and where's Nia? Of course, she's Samurai X at this point, and we've got a Samurai X Legacy variant, so I didn't think it was overly necessary. But of course, you could have a Legacy Samurai X in there as well, but getting the rest of the ZX Ninja in a Snake Train set would have been great, especially considering, of course, all of them were on the train, but I didn't want to have every single one of them in one set. But yeah, I think a snake train would have been a fantastic set to have gotten, and I think it's one of those ones that a lot of people would have ended up buying. But unfortunately, we didn't get one, so I've thrown it into the concept. But those were the two larger sets that I thought of for what a legacy variant could be. But then, of course, that brings us to the final set for my concept. And like I said, it would have been a much larger one, more towards the more modular set, or like the city temple that we got for Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 2. But in this instance, and for the legacy variant, I thought it's about time we finally got a proper take on the Cloud Kingdom. Because for as important as the Cloud Kingdom is, we've never actually got any sort of representation, and having a big budget, big piece count set really would have done it the justice that it deserves. And in my head, you would have gotten, say, the main tower where the Sword of Sanctuary was held, and then you would have also gotten maybe two smaller towers to go beside it, and then maybe also one of the boats that the ninja used to go around in. That's kind of the general concept I had for the building itself. Maybe even then chuck in some more stuff that links back to Dragon's Rising as well. Maybe the outside area where all the writers were writing in Season 1 of Dragon's Rising. Maybe even add some more references to it. But the idea generally is to be inspired off of the Season 5 variant. But again, leave enough nods in there to where it could work as a Dragon's Rising one as well. As for the minifigures, I did like to think of a couple of nice ones, because of course these bigger sets tend to come with more sought after minifigures, so I thought of it when it came to this one. So I initially started off with a legacy variant of Possessed Lloyd, which would have been a very nice one to have gotten, especially if they continue with the Season 5 legacy variants. We would have had a legacy version of Bancha, to obviously link up with the fact that we got a legacy version of Goldar as well, so just another nice opportunity to get more generals if anything. We would have then have seen Fenwick, which would have been another nice one to have finally gotten in hand. Two Cloud Kingdom monks, and this is kind of where I'm leaning into the idea that have a nod to Dragon's Rising as well, maybe just base the monks off of the Dragon's Rising ones, so Euphrasia could have been paired up nicely with them as well. But that was a general idea for the villains in particular. I did think as well having a buildable Nimbus, that would have been nice to have had, just as a nice final accent to the set. Have a little gimmick where he could grab onto the boat as well, just nice little concepts overall. But a buildable Nimbus would have been nice as well. But then as for the heroes, we would have had a Season 5 Nia, Cole and Jay to finish out the Season 5 Deepstone Legacy Ninja. And then in this wave, you would have finished the Sleeveless, you would have had the ZX, and you would have had the Deepstone ones finished as well. And what better way to do it than in a large Cloud Kingdom set? But having those three would have been very nice to have seen. But I did chuck in one final minifigure just to really sweeten the deal, because personally speaking, I would love to get a minifigure of this guy, and that is actually going to be Quanish, and have him even come with the scroll about Dragonfall, maybe just as a nod to Crystallize. But again, he came from the Cloud Kingdom, so it would have been nice to have just had him as a minifigure in hand as well, and of course these bigger sets are really good for stuff like that, so the perfect opportunity to get a Quanish as well. But those were the minifigures that I thought of for this set. But that was the overall idea, just have a nice neat variant of Cloud Kingdom where you have the three buildings all linked together by pathing, and like I said, have those nods to Dragon's Rising as well. But again, let me know what you think of this. Is this something that you would want to see? Is this something that you wouldn't want to? Or what would you really change about it? Because like I said, I think that's personally what I would have liked to have seen, but I don't speak for the Ninjago community, so please let me know what you think of it as well. But that is every single set I thought of for what a new variant of Legacy could have looked like. And like I said, let me know what you think of this, because those are the 7 ideas that I had, and I do like all of them. I think all of them have a lot of merit, and I think a lot of them would have just been really nice to have seen. But of course, I could be completely wrong, I could have a completely different opinion to you. So this is where I'm officially going to hand it off to you guys. And please let me know which ones you would agree with, which ones you disagree with, what a version of another Legacy wave would look like to you. But that is about it for today, guys, and thank you for watching. Like I said, just let me know what you think. This is completely concept, and again, remember, this is all completely done by someone who has absolutely no right making a line of Lego sets. But that is about it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. Take care. Okay. Bye.